Greetings, book lovers, and welcome to Author-ized. Today's guest is Charles Alexander London. You may know him as C. Alexander London, Alex London, or Charles London. And today we're going to call him Alex.
Hi.
Alex has published 2 works of nonfiction for adults, a whole slew of fiction for middle grade readers, 2 novels for teens, and even a picture book. Welcome, Alex.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's good to talk to you.
No
Through the
problem.
magic of the interwebs.
Sure. Thanks a lot for agreeing to talk to us today.
It's very exciting for me because this is the first sort of recorded Skype interview I've done since I moved, and now I have this sort of amazing office. I've never had an office before, and now I have this office with all these bookshelves behind me, so I'm super excited to
It does look pretty cool, I have to say.
sharing my new bookshelves.
Yeah. So Alex has written a lot of books, and I don't think we can really talk about all of them today. But let's start by talking about a few reviews. Very brief ones. So Kirkus called Alex's first book, One Day the Soldiers Came, eye-opening, searing, and heartbreaking. Also from Kirkus, Alex's first installment in the Accidental Adventures series, entitled We Are Not Eaten by Yaks, is, quote, a fine combination of dry wit and slapstick. And from Entertainment Weekly about Proxy, another one of Alex's novels, quote, looking for an awesome YA summer read? Look no further than Alex London's Proxy.
I should add that you can read Proxy any time of year, not just in the summer.
That is a good point.
It's a book for all seasons, really.
This isn't my first time speaking with Alex. We actually met about 10 years ago in 2007, I believe.
Sounds about right.
I think so. I was just starting as a young adult services librarian for NYPL, and I think you were too, or maybe you had been there for about a year or so.
Yeah, that was sort of toward the end of my, I know, I guess I was right. I'd been there a few months, yeah.
A few months, okay.
Yeah. I didn't make it very long. I was only a YA librarian for about a year altogether.
So you got your master's in library science from Pratt in Brooklyn, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I in the Manhattan campus.
In the
yeah.
Manhattan campus, okay.
So Pratt is based in Brooklyn.
Mhm.
Although my first time on Pratt's campus was actually at graduation because I went always to the Manhattan campus. And I got to the Brooklyn campus and there's all this amazing sculpture around. And I thought, wow, this is a beautiful campus. Why didn't I come here earlier? Oh, well.
So you have 2 books for adults. One Day the Soldiers Came and Far From Zion.
Yes.
And from what I understand, these kind of stem from the people, places, and experiences surrounding your work with Refugees International?
Yeah, that's how it started with One Day the Soldiers Came. I began as a journalist. I always wanted to be a writer. Ever since I was in about 5th grade when I went from being a very, what they call, reluctant reader. You know, I really didn't like reading. I wasn't patient enough. I couldn't sit still long enough. I really struggled. And I discovered a book that I loved after a struggle, hating a lot of books. And I loved it so much that I wrote to the author, and he encouraged me to keep using my imagination and that maybe one day I could become an author. So I decided sort of end of 5th grade, beginning of 6th grade, that, yeah, I wanted to become an author. But I had no idea how to do that. So I ended up a journalist, which was amazing training for being a novelist. And I started working with an organization called Refugees International, which is a refugee advocacy organization based in DC, and was lucky enough to be able to travel with them and do research on youth and armed conflict, children and war. And through interviews and discussions and drawings and endless games of soccer in various parts of the world, ended up producing some articles and some research papers, and eventually the book One Day the Soldiers Came. And through that work, I kind of got the idea of my second book, which is much more personal, about Jewish communities in far-flung places around the world, called Far From Zion. And so those were my 2 kind of nonfiction books. And it was in writing them was really my very public training as a writer.
Awesome.
And then I switched later to kids' books.
So yeah, you have written 4 series for middle grade readers. Is that correct?
Is that so?
The accidental.
Accidental Adventures was my first, about two children who love television, but whose parents are famous explorers, and they're forced to go on amazing adventures all over the world, and they're totally over it the whole time because all they want to do is watch TV, and they have to use what they've learned from watching way too much television to save the world and save their family and solve mysteries and all that stuff. So that was my first, which I actually got that idea on an airplane while fleeing an uprising in Burma during the Saffron Revolution in 2007, actually. Right after I left NYPL as a librarian, I was back to doing journalism work and had caught up in the Saffron Revolution, had to flee, and had this crazy idea for a children's book while on the airplane. So that was my first series, The Accidental Adventures. The second, I believe, was Dog Tags, Tides of War, The Wild Ones. So that's 4. And then I've written 2 books in the 39 Clues series for Scholastic.
Yeah, they're over here. You can see those.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, and then at some point in there wrote some YA novels.
You also have written. You have 1 published picture book, and you have one in the works.
Yet it will be out next year.
But did you have one that New Day, New Friends? Is that not out?
Oh yes,
that's
I forget about that one because I did it as sort of working with Lit World, which is a global literacy organization. They're the creators of World Read Aloud Day, and I got involved with them through my work in East Africa largely. And I got to know their amazing visionary founder, Pam Allen, and ended up for a while joining kind of the advisory board of Lit World. And because of that, ended up writing this picture book for them to highlight some of their work and the messages that they're trying to send about the power of story. So yeah, New Day, New Friends. I totally forgot about that. It's terrible. It's terrible. But I have a new picture book coming out from Penguin, from Philomel Books next year.
Yeah, I understand you're working with Frank Morrison. Is this the illustrator of Melba and her big trombone?
Yes.
The same one? The same
Yes.
Frank Morrison? Yeah.
Yeah, he's illustrating it as we speak, I think. Maybe he's done. I don't know. It's such a funny, picture books are such a different thing. I worked extremely hard on the 600 words. But, you know, it doesn't take quite as long as writing a novel because there's just not that many words, but it's actually much harder. You have to make every word count. But then you're done, and the illustrator does much more work.
Sure.
So he's been working on it for quite a while. I did my part ages ago. But he's a stunning artist, and I can't wait to see what he comes up with.
Great. Let's talk about Proxy.
Let's!
Okay.
My novel. All right.
All right. So you have said in interviews many times that the Proxy was inspired by Sid Fleischman's The Whipping Boy and M.T. Anderson's Feed.
Yeah.
And I definitely see that. But
there's references to both hidden throughout the book.
but also I see a lot of sort of maybe some other literary allusions from outside of the sort of dystopian YA fiction genre.
Mm-hmm.
Could you talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, so Proxy is a story of 2 teen boys from opposite ends of a society where the wealthy pay for the poor to take their punishments when they screw up, when they break the law. And it's a whipping boy story. It's taking that medieval concept of the whipping boy, so memorably written about by Sid Fleischman in his book, The Whipping Boy, and it pushes it into this dystopian future society. And as I was writing it, and exploring all the different themes of debt and friendship and justice and poverty and all of these, the themes that sort of work their way throughout the book, I didn't realize that I was also basically writing a tale of 2 cities in a way. And so it came in a later draft. The characters, one of the 2 boys, his name is Sid, and his full name is Sidney Carton, because the proxies, the orphans in this book who take the punishments for their patrons, are all named after literary characters. Their names kind of pulled from a database and ripped out of context. I wanted to explore how we kind of de-story people who are inconvenient to society and how we often tell their stories out of context. And so I took fictional names out of context and applied them to sort of society's unwanteds in this story. But that was a late innovation that I came to after a draft or 2. when I was reading over for revision and realized what I was doing with A Tale of Two Cities at the same time as I wanted to kind of reference Sid Fleischman. And I thought, Sid, oh, Sidney Carton, Sid Fleischman, I can name him Sid. And it all kind of spiraled from there. And not to spoil anything, but when you get to the end of Proxy, the entire ending is essentially taking the ending of A Tale of Two Cities and kind of playing with it. So that I was very consciously, by the end of the revision process, riffing on A Tale of Two Cities and that story of revolution and kindness and love and all of that. But it wasn't deliberate at first. It happened. Books are strange genies. They often grant wishes you didn't ask for. So I didn't consciously know I was referencing A Tale of Two Cities and all these other literary works. I mean, there's biblical references in there. There's all kinds of stuff. Not all of it was deliberate, but I think books are often smarter than their writers. I hope books are smarter than their writers. So I would often discover things I didn't realize I knew, and maybe didn't even know. There's the technical aspect of writing, learning about structure and pace and plotting and characterization and language and rhythm and voice. And then there's the magic that you can't quite control. And you don't know where it comes from, and you don't know why things happen the way they do exactly. You're kind of channeling them. And Proxy was a book I very much felt like something happened and something more than myself came through it.
Great. I was thinking, referencing the character Sidney Carton, just bringing up Dickens in general is very, very, very appropriate for Proxy, since it very much, I think, reflects this Victorian British society, early industrial British society, where there are things such as debtors' prisons, where debt is such a huge and terrible thing to have.
Yeah, I drew a lot, especially there's certainly the Dickensian world that Sid especially lives in, with the poverty and the kind of lawlessness and the pickpockets and thieves and all of that is very Dickensian, but it's also drawn from my work as a journalist in various urban slums around the world, whether in the slums of Mumbai or Nairobi or Rangoon. All of those places drew in too, but those places could also be straight out of Dickens. The issues that Dickens characters were dealing with, people deal with every day in our world, and I took that and thrust it into the future world, and added the holograms and robots and targeted advertising and that sort of thing. But very much these sort of Dickensian characters were rattling around in my brain. You never know when high school English is going to come back and get you.
I also can't help but think about the setting that you were in when you're writing this. I'm guessing, to a certain extent, that you're somewhere around 2007, 8, 9, maybe, during the subprime mortgage crisis, and then the ensuing Occupy movement, and I see a lot of connections there as well.
It was very much it started with the Tea Party. I was actually thinking about the Tea Party movement and thought, what if they got what they wanted? They're screaming about the evils of government and how we need to free everything up for big business. And I was like, wait a minute, big business is suddenly this like merciful thing that if we could just let big business do whatever it wanted, everything would be okay. So I imagined, what if there was no government anymore? It was just business. You weren't a citizen, you were a customer. And you get what you can pay for: food, housing, education. Nothing's free. Justice, nothing's free. And a quote from Bryan Stevenson, the activist, justice reform activist, really stuck with me during this time in writing Proxy. He said that the opposite of poverty is not wealth. The opposite of poverty is justice. And that really stuck in my head. So that was what was going on. And then the Occupy movement, I kind of think of this is like basically the Occupy movement as a dystopian novel. And there's a quote in the beginning, one of my epigraphs is from Douglas Rushkoff, who was a big speaker during the Occupy movement and was kind of one of the intellectual forefathers of Occupy. So that was very much in my head, the politics of debt and wealth and income inequality while I wrote it. Big ideas, but also I wanted it to be, an exciting, ripping yarn with action, and you can have all the big ideas you want in these sorts of stories, and I think dystopian stories are great vehicles for big ideas. But the story still has to be compelling, and the characters still have to feel real and true, and like people you would care about. And so that's the heart of the story. While these big ideas all sort of swirl around these characters who just are looking for connection, as characters do in any sort of story.
I think it's fairly unique, that perspective as well. Most of the time in this dystopian fiction, Wells or Huxley or Veronica Roth or Susan Collins even, you're dealing with a totalitarian government. And in this case, the government is basically non-existent, and you're really dealing with exactly the opposite as which you just described, which I think is very interesting.
Yeah, it's frightening seeing also how, all these years later we're headed very much in that direction. We're outsourcing everything and hollowing out the government's ability to provide services, and turning that over to private companies, which is great if you have the money to be a customer, but it's not so great if you can't afford to participate in all the things that society has, and it's frightening when we start measuring your value as a human by your ability to participate in the marketplace. And that's the underlying anxiety in Proxy, is Sid has no value to the marketplace except as a body to take the punishments for his wealthy patron Knox, and the journey of these two boys trying to see the value in each other beyond their utility to each other is really the fundamental driving force of the arc of these characters. So they don't have to agree, but they have to see each other as fully human.
Mm-hmm. Also, the title Proxy, I think about it in terms of, maybe it's because I'm kind of interested in computers and networks and things like that, but I think about web proxies and how you can disguise your location using web proxies, and I wonder about, and there's so much about hacking involved in your novel as well. I was wondering if that was like really something you thought about when you named it.
Yeah, well, so the title came to me very, very early when I realized it worked on so many different levels with the story. I mean, first of all, it's just the basic meaning of the word proxy, something that stands in for something else. It's the whipping boy. I mean, it is that, just by definition. But then when I got my bar mitzvah, my grandmother gave me, I think it was 100 shares of Coca-Cola stock. And so I always get in the mail, it's like Coca-Cola stockholder notices. And they're often to vote on things for the company,
right.
But I don't follow the company's developments and so they send you these proxy voting forms where someone else will vote in your place if you check a little box off. And I thought, this is how corporate governance works. So that idea of corporate governance in the society of my novel really worked with Proxy. And then obviously how everyone is networked, and the whole system is this hybrid digital biological thing, and everything is a computer system that our heroes have to hack. So yes, then Proxy, the Proxy servers and all of that, how it comes into play with computers, definitely fed into that as well. And I thought, well, that's perfect. What a good word for this. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it was very much on my mind.
I loved it. So you are pretty prolific. So when do you find time to write?
I write. I was about to say I write all the time, but I've been in kind of a slump for a few weeks now and haven't written very much. But usually I don't tend to sit down and just write and let my mind wander. I give myself little goals every day. And I know a lot of writers do this sort of thing, so it's not groundbreaking, but I write 1,000 words every day, just like 4 typed pages. And that's a goal I've learned I can accomplish. Usually if I reach 1,000, I'll reach a lot more, but I sort of make myself hit that 1,000 every day so that I accumulate volume. And sometimes it turns into 5,000 words, and sometimes it's a slog to get to that 1,000, and it takes all day. But I do that, 5 or 6 days a week, and it adds up pretty fast. I guess that's how I do it. I try not to be too precious about it, so I do it when I don't feel like it, and I do it when I'm not inspired, and I try and do it when I'm traveling. I don't always succeed. Because I have so many stories I want to tell, I need to get them out. There's so many different kinds of stories that fascinate me, and I just can't stop. So I guess I don't know how I did it. I was in these past few weeks when I've been kind of procrastinating and not really doing a lot of writing. I've been beating myself up about it, and I had to stop and think. In the decade since I stopped being a librarian, not even a full decade yet, um, I've published or am about to publish something like 23 books. I've decided I can allow myself to take a break. So I've given myself permission to take these few weeks and just not really be working on anything and just letting my imagination wander and see what comes out of it. I'm also between drafts right now, waiting for notes from an editor, so that helps.
So who are some of the authors who inspired you?
There are so many. I mean, the first author I ever loved was Brian Jakes, who wrote Redwall. He's the author who wrote me that letter that inspired me very directly to write. And I loved his world building. He just taught me so much about world building, which is one of my favorite things to do in fantasy and sci-fi. Even in realistic fiction, you're still building a world and setting a scene for your readers. And so I learned a lot from him. Probably the biggest, in a weird way, influence early on for me, specifically with Proxy and sci-fi, was Orson Scott Card and his book Ender's Game, which was assigned to me for summer reading the summer before 8th grade, and I loved it. I devoured that book. It was so awesome. It was filled with action and adventure and questions of morality and big ideas and friendship and kindness, and it was this amazing book. And I also thought at the time it was the first gay book I'd ever read. And the summer before 8th grade, I was just starting to realize myself that maybe I wasn't like the other guys in my class, and I was terrified of that. I had no gay role models. I'd never seen gay people outside of anything but news reports about AIDS. It was a scary thing to realize this, and I was terrified that that was the end of me. I'd be disowned and I'd die some horrible death, and I was terrified. And then I read Ender's Game. And there's these two boys, Ender and Bean, who seemed like they were in love with each other romantically. And they were also wrestling naked a lot throughout the book, which seventh grade me really liked. I was like, oh my, is it hot in here? So I read that, and it showed me, wow, maybe I didn't have the word for it. I didn't think gay. I just thought, that's me. That's me in these pages. I'm like that. And it showed me that there could be a future, that I could be this way and also fight aliens in space and be a hero and be the protagonist of my own story, not the sort of sad morality tale in someone else's story. And it really gave me hope. In later years, I learned about Orson Scott Card, that he's actually kind of an unrepentant homophobe, right, and very active in denying rights to LGBT people. That broke my heart. It absolutely gutted me, because he had inspired me and I think inspired a whole generation of readers and writers to think about the other and to choose kindness and friendship and generosity of spirit. So even as it gutted me, and I kind of wrote Proxy with one of the two, with Sid, as an explicitly, openly gay action hero, as an answer to Ender's Game. I wrote the book I wished had existed. I wrote the book that I thought had existed when I was that age. So I kind of wrote the book that teenage me needed when I wrote Proxy. But one of the lessons I learned from this, who Orson Scott Card is versus what his book is, and what his best book did for me, is that idea that books are smarter than their readers, than their writers, that readers bring to the book what they need and take from it what they need, and often our books, it's just dropping a stone in a pond, and we can't know how far the ripples will go. So I don't think the ideas of the author have any impact on what that book did for me. Mm-hmm. He might have intended it one day, but who cares what he intended? Yeah. That book was the book I needed it to be at the time I needed it. And great books can do that even when their authors are wretched people, or at least people with wretched ideas. Right. So that was a big influence. And then others, later, Ursula Le Guin is a huge inspiration. And now the, contemporary YA writers, I read a lot of YA because I was a YA librarian and I write YA, and a lot of my friends are YA writers. So some of the stuff coming out now is just wonderful. There's so many good books out there now.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any favorite fictional characters?
That is so. I get asked that a lot, and I can never think. I love so Titus from Feed, M.T. Anderson's Feed, which is a book I love. I really like him. He's kind of awful. Like he's got no imagination or curiosity, and he's totally self-centered. But somehow that he's charming in all of that. So I really like him. I also like Milo from the Phantom Tollbooth, who's similar when it starts. He's just like, oh, I'm dissatisfied with everything. I don't know what it says about me that I like those characters. I mean, the character of Sidney Carton in A Tale of Two Cities, I quite like. He's also a ne'er-do-well. I always like the ne'er-do-wells. I don't know what it is. So some of those, really anybody Holly Black writes, I love all her characters. They're just so compelling. She could write about somebody reading the phone book, and I'd probably be like, "That's amazing!" I love her stuff, and I love the characters she writes. He's not from a novel, but Calvin of Calvin and Hobbes, kind of my soulmate.
Sure.
I keep Calvin and Hobbes on my desk at all times. There's a whole stack.
Nice.
Because I love Calvin. So those, I guess, are some of them.
Great.
It's really hard to pick.
Sure. So what are you working on now?
So right now, the next thing to come out for me will be the end of the Wild Ones series, which is a talking animal fantasy gangster series, kind of my homage to Redwall, but a very 21st century version. So it's not like talking mice in armor having battles. It's gangster animals in alleyways fighting a vicious ancient war against house pets. So the last book in that's this one, The Great Escape, comes out, I guess, in the fall. And it's a zoo breakout, sort of prison break story where our hero, Kit the raccoon, and his rat friend, Eenie, have to break these creatures out of the zoo. So that's the next book that'll be out from me. Then after that, there's a picture book coming out with Frank Morrison called, I forget what it's called. They just changed the title. Wrong Man.
Wrong Man is what it says on your website, yeah.
And his sidekick Janice or something like that. They just added a little bit. It's a superhero story about a superhero who always does the wrong thing. And it's fun. It's just a bit of like absurdity. And then I'm waiting for notes on the first draft, which for me is more like the fifth draft. But the first draft my editor has seen of the first book in a new YA trilogy called Other Bloods that will be out from Ferris, Strauss and Giroux in 2018 at some point. It's a fantasy set in a world of cutthroat falconry. A fatherless brother and sister are compelled to go on a quest to capture the most feared and valuable and awe-inspiring bird in their world, the ghost eagle, who can neither be caught nor tamed. And they through a series of events, have to capture this mythical bird. This is not a great pitch for it. I haven't talked about it a lot, so I haven't developed my a great pitch. But there's a war brewing, and there's sort of an anti-falconry sect rising in the desert coming to wipe out this kingdom, and this eagle might hold the key to the war, and this brother and sister have to try and capture it to save their kingdom, but they each have their own reasons and their own secrets, and everybody's kind of after them. And it's a big sort of romping adventure. Sort of my agent, I think, pitched it as the Scorpio races meets Lord of the Rings with falcons. Sounds pretty cool. I hope the book lives up to that that comparison. So that's the next thing, and so I've just written the first in that, and I think fans of Proxy will really like it, even though it's not futuristic. It's fantasy. But I think some of the themes are still things that I'm working through. Some of the stuff from Proxy is still in there. There's action, there's adventure, there's excitement, there's crazy, vast world building. It's a little queer. It's a little dangerous. It's a whole lot of fun, and I think all sorts of readers are really going to like it. I'm extremely proud of it. I think it's maybe the best thing I've ever written. So we'll see.
Cool. Great. So Alex, at the end of every interview, we ask our authors to read a little segment from one of their books and talk to us a little bit about it. We call them Buckles one-liners.
All right.
You have a book with you?
Yeah, well, so I just showed you. I have Calvin and Hobbes, but I'll pick one. So the one I have on my desk right now is just the latest. So I guess I'll do
That's
that
cool.
random, just like open up to wherever,
Yeah, sure.
see what happens. Okay, let me see. This is page 85. I'm just looking for a good. Okay, so this is from the last wild ones. I'm gonna read. It's a paragraph. I'm gonna read the whole paragraph
Sounds good.
because yeah. Okay. uh, do I need to set the scene or anything, or just dive in randomly?
It depends on whatever you like, whatever you want to do.
Okay, well, this is so our heroes, Kit and his rat friend Eni, are talking to their nemesis, this pet dog named Titus, who they've snuck into his house because he knows something about how to get to the zoo. So they're sort of questioning him while he's trying to eat them. It's a tense theme, and they're talking right now. A misnomer, Eni explained. It means a wrong name, like how fireflies aren't really flies, but beetles, though we call them fireflies anyway. And calling someone a zoo animal just because they live in a zoo is like calling you, Titus, a leash lover just because you walk on a leash. It's insulting, right? There's more to you than leashes, right? Like, you're a tick-brained shampoo stinking brat, too, but you wouldn't want us to call you that to your face. So that's that is our hero. They're debating what a zoo animal is, as Titus is asking them, like, why do you want to help all these zoo animals? And they're arguing, there's no such thing as zoo animals. There are animals who live in the zoo. And this idea that we are more than our circumstances. So it's a silly scene where our hero is just trying to come up with clever ways to insult their enemy, because she sort of loves wordplay, like shampoo stinking brat, but because she's an alley rat, so she probably smells more natural, and he's a little Italian greyhound who gets shampooed and wears a little silk collar. So they're debating the nature of identity, really, even though they're really plotting a zoo outbreak. So that's that scene, and they're learning the word misnomer, which I think is fun. I always like to teach kids strange words like insouciant and misnomer, nonplussed. I think in the second book, it was either the first or the second Wild Ones book, I used the word nonplussed a lot because I really want people to use that word properly. It's a great word, and it doesn't mean what it sounds like, so I try and use it.
I noticed that you actually define misnomer in that paragraph as well, so which is great, yeah.
Yeah, I like for that, especially that 8 to 12-year-old reading group. They love words, but often haven't been exposed to a lot of them. So I always want to figure out ways that are fun to kind of contextualize cool words that they can add to their vocabularies, but to do it in ways that are kind of sillier and add to the story, so it doesn't feel like, oh, hey kids, here's your vocab lesson, but like it's part of the story, and it's authentic to the character that she would define this word and then insult the dog using it, and it carries a lot of the themes of the story of who gets to define what kind of animal is what and what does that mean.
Awesome.
Yeah. So there's talking animal adventure with vocabulary and various good societal values, I guess. Also, there's baboons throwing hot dogs, which I think is important.
Oh.
Yeah, like you do.
Sounds great.
It's a little bit different than Proxy. Although there is a zoo outbreak in Proxy, I'm just realizing.
Yeah.
I'm just realizing that there are themes that connect my work. The chaos at the zoo. So there you go. I try and find the through line through all my various books, and it's hard because there might not be one. But chaos at the zoo sounds like a good one for now.
Cool. Thanks a lot, Alex. It was really great to reconnect with you.
Great to talking with you. Thanks so much for having me today.
Sure, no problem. Join us next time on Author-ized when we talk to other inspiring authors about their inspiring work.